Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bloomberg UK. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, on today's show, we look ahead to the coronation of King Charles and dig deeper into the monarch's finances. Now, in a moment, we'll speak to the chief executive who manages the largest of the royal investment entities, the Crown Estate. On last count, the firm manages £16.5 billion worth of assets with a net revenue profit of over £312 million. Now, since the death of Queen Elizabeth last September, the Crown Estate has a new owner, her son, King Charles. However, the estate, as it declares, is not the private property of the king. The royal family is funded via the sovereign grant, an annual lump sum derived from a 1760 agreement between the monarch and the UK government. Meanwhile, the Crown Estate, also profits and revenue, are deemed public money, which it pays to the Treasury. Now, over £15 billion of its assets line the property sector, notably the whole of Regent Street and St James's Street in London. It also boasts 2.6 million square feet of redesigned office space in the nation's capital. Now, the Crown Estate also focuses heavily on renewable energy. It holds the right, for example, to virtually all the seabed surrounding the UK out to about 12 nautical miles. Well, the Crown Estate says UK offshore wind farms have produced 45 terawatt hours of electricity last year, making the UK the world's second biggest offshore wind generator. Now, on Saturday morning, the King Charles III will leave Buckingham Palace in a 6-horse-drawn carriage en route to Westminster Abbey. The route will pass key properties associated with the royal family that has an overall market value of more than £2.3 billion. Alex Morgan reports.
So go on then, how much do you think Buckingham Palace is worth? More than £1 billion. And that's just the start of the unique collection of assets that underpins the British monarchy.
The route King Charles will take to his coronation is just over a mile long, but that mile gives a snapshot of the monarchy's billions. As the King's coach heads down the Mall, on his left he'll be able to see these cream-coloured mansions.
Now that's Carlton House Terrace. They've got marble staircases, ballrooms and a view over St James's Park, which is literally there. Now that makes them some of the most desirable homes in the city, and many of those super prime buildings are the property of the monarchy through the Crown Estate.
As the King makes his way through Trafalgar Square, if he were to crane his neck up the Strand, he could probably see the Art Deco offices next to the 5-star Savoy Hotel.
Now those also support his royal fortune through the Duchy of Lancaster.
The Crown Estate and the Duchy of Lancaster are the two main entities that fund the British monarch. These estates oversee total assets of about £17 billion.
But here's the quirk. The King doesn't actually own any of these assets, not in the way you and I might use the term. Here's why.
Think about the Pope and the Vatican. The Pope does not own that personally. In the same way, King Charles does not personally own Buckingham Palace. He cannot put it on the market. These assets are held in trust effectively for the UK monarch and his successors over generations.
So while the crown jewels can't go up for sale, there are some serious perks to being king. For one, the monarch pays no inheritance tax on anything received from their predecessor. That's helped to preserve the Windsor's personal family fortune.
He is, through the personal assets that he has, through Balmoral and Sandringham Estate and the land holdings, significant land holdings around them, he is a very wealthy man. We estimate at least $800 million for his personal wealth.
So given that sizable nest egg, when King Charles comes back to Buckingham Palace after the coronation, it'll probably feel quite irrelevant whether he actually owns it or not.
That was Alex Morgan breaking down the coronation procession route of King Charles and the wealth attached to it. Now, here with me, Bloomberg's Ben Staples. Ben, thank you for joining us. I mean, you're looking at the wealth of the king and exactly what we can expect going forward. So what can we see along King Charles's procession route?
I think, as we saw in that report just there, Francine, Carlton House Terrace really is one of the ultra-prime residences, properties in the world. So actually, in the past, the Crown Estate has sold some of them in the past to billionaire families, including the Hindujas from India. They've refurbished it, spent more than $100 million in total to acquire and refurbish that. So we see Carlton House Terrace. We also see part of some of the crown jewels in the royal property portfolio. They're not part of the Crown Estate, but of course we'll see Buckingham Palace, but also St James's Place, and also maybe Clarence House. We might catch a spot of that. And right just before he turns to Whitehall, as we heard in that report, he might see some of the assets held on the Strand. And that's an important part of the private sort of piggy bank for the king, part of the Duchy of Lancaster estate. Just on the Strand, there are quite a lot of assets down there too. So all around where he's going to be walking on Saturday, the king is going to be surrounded by his riches.
Thank you so much, Ben Supples, our Bloomberg's wealth reporter. I mean, it is quite an amazing and in times controversial procession that we could see. Now, joining us now is Dan Labad, Chief Executive of the Crown Estate. Dan, we're really excited to have you on because not many people know what the Crown Estate do. So we laid it out in terms of, you know, where the money goes. Do you have to manage this differently to basically a private company if it were on the FTSE?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's important to say that we're very unique.
Yes, you are.
But you know, we are set up independently under an Act of Parliament, the 1961 Crown Estate Act, and our role is very simple. You know, we have to create value for the country, for the taxpayer. We do that in a number of ways. One is obviously delivering 100% of our revenue to the Treasury. And in addition, thinking about some of the long-term national needs, for example, how we tackle climate change and energy security, how we think about the environment generally in the natural world, and thirdly, how we think about economic growth, something that, you know, is really, really important at the moment with families suffering and, you know, what's going on in the country.
And we know that, of course, the King has always, from a very young age, taken a very keen interest and cares deeply about sustainability. Is that why it's one of your mandates, or this was just in bed because of your closeness to basically Treasury and, you know, the fact that you need to make money but also maybe want to do some good?
Yeah, we act and operate independently. We have to under our remit, under the Act. So the Royal Household has no day-to-day involvement with the business. And the things that we're talking about are things that are obviously, you know, in the national interest. Now, clearly, being involved in things like climate change and the environment is something that, you know, the Royal Household is very interested in and supportive of what we do as a result. But we are independent and we operate day-to-day under our own remit.
So you own a lot of the central London property. What's the outlook for that market like?
Well, it's important, I guess, for your viewers to understand a little bit more than central London. And I'll come back to that, but we also have a large land holding across the country in terms of opportunity for economic growth that we utilise, where a large...
This is what, regeneration?
Regeneration, looking at another area that I'll get to in a moment with the seabed and how we make sure that, you know, the benefits of the seabed come back on shore. We're one of the largest rural landowners in the country, in fact, one of the largest food producers. So the relationship...
You're everywhere.
Yeah, I guess this is the point, and marine is obviously the last, and obviously offshore renewables is a huge part of our future and a huge UK success story that we haven't been the only party to, but we are fundamental in making that the success it needs to be. I think, you know, coming back, you know, what's important is that 100 years ago, our remit was to create value for the country. And we used our land holding back then in a very different way to the way we're using it today, because things like climate change and the environment weren't as prevalent. And in 100 years from now, who knows what the challenges are going to be. And that's the exciting thing about the Crown Estate. It's a company for the country. And my role as Chief Executive and our team's role is to ensure that we're setting it up for the future so we can continue to do that.
So if we break it down, we'll get to the seabed in a second, we'll maybe talk about regeneration, but central London property is one of the hot topics that we try and figure out whether it goes up or down, whether you see challenges and what your tenants are telling you.
Yeah, so clearly coming off the back of COVID and the digital disruption we started to see before COVID, property is full of challenge, interest rates and a whole host of other factors. One of the good things that we're seeing post-COVID is footfall returning to pre-COVID levels. We've put a lot of effort into, because we're contiguous owners, as in we own, you know, a single large piece of real estate, we can think about the spaces between the buildings, not just the buildings themselves. And that goes a long way to ensure that we're getting people onto the streets, which was one of our concerns during COVID. Are we going to be able to make that happen again? Well, that is happening. And now talking to our customers, residential, commercial and retail, and looking at how they're changing.
So does that mean that you're changing with them? And
yes.
Actually, so the trend is what, working more from home? Does it change forever the way that we use and shop in central London?
Well, I think, you know, anyone sort of giving an absolute prediction on where that'll end up, you know, I'd love to have that crystal ball. But I think what we do know, it's changing. I think, and we think that, you know, London is long-term going to be very prosperous and continue to be. But as you say, I think the dynamics will change, how we activate the streets. And we're seeing that from our customers now. Different type of retailers, for example, are interested in Regent Street than were 5 years ago. Offices are still prime office space is still incredibly attractive. The challenge at the moment is, can we produce enough of it, and can we produce enough of it in a way that customers want, decarbonised and things that are, of the day.
And Dan, I mean, one of the things that, a lot of business leaders certainly stood up and listened to was the Burberry chairman last week telling Rishi Sunak, look, the retailing environment in the UK is very difficult because of the VAT and the fact that they're not giving foreigners a chance to come in. Is things like that things that you think about and lobby the government for because it makes a difference, or do you stay away from this?
We focus on what will work for our customers.
Right.
That's our focus.
Yeah.
And because the challenge at the moment is everyone trying to work out what good looks like, our focus is keeping up what good looks like for our customers.
Talk to me a little bit about the seabed. And this is, in our research, it's amazing. We had a map saying how much you own in the 15 nautical miles. How will that change as I guess, the energy transition accelerates?
Yeah, so I think the seabed, first of all, is a huge UK success story, as I was saying. 25 years, second only to China in terms of market size, one of the most attractive places to invest in the world. Future jobs, which is incredibly important, and it's changing for a number of ways. It's becoming busier generally. There's navigation, there's defence, there's fishing, there's the environment, to name just a few. And on top of that now, the importance of the rollout of renewables. And one of the things that's incredibly important is that we're not going to achieve our net zero targets as a country if we don't utilise the seabed. But we have to do it in a way we're embracing different technologies. Wind's one technology that is up and running at the moment, but we have to think about carbon capture and storage. We have to think about hydrogen. And we have to think about, in that context, how we protect the seabed from a natural perspective. Incredibly important.
I mean, you're really at the forefront of every question that we ask all of our chief executives. Do you worry about AI? Do you worry about retraining? Like, if you're going to create jobs in these new technologies, whose job is it to make sure that you find the right staff with the right qualifications? Yeah,
so I think we are concerned about skills levels in the future. And one of the things that we've done recently in the area of heritage and decarbonising is working with partners in London, other businesses and government, on how we think about bringing those skills in. So coming back to your question about, who's responsible, I think it's all our responsibility. It won't just happen. We have to all work towards. But I think, first of all, our role is to make sure we're creating the demand so that we have the pull factor, which I think offshore renewables is a key part of. And then as part of that, we have to ensure that the jobs are coming to the UK and that we have the skills deployed to deliver.
Because your remit is so large, and again, it's also intrinsically tied to the UK citizens, what do you think your hardest part of your job is?
I think the hardest part of my job is to help people understand how important the Crown Estate is to the country. It is incredibly important. It serves national interests both for today. We've delivered £3 billion of returns to Treasury over the last 10 years. We're going to be doing more moving forward. But even more importantly, making sure that we're tackling some of these national challenges and doing it in a way that we just get more impactful and better at doing it as we go. I
mean, are you like a sovereign wealth fund, but with physical assets only in the UK? Is that how, we're trying to help a lot of our viewers understand? How do you see yourself?
I think we're like a sovereign wealth fund or sovereign wealth funds, so insofar as sovereign wealth funds create value for the countries they represent. Right. But I think it's important to just reinforce that we are unique. We sit between the private and public sector under this parliamentary remit to serve the country. So I think, in creating value for the country, yes, but that's probably where the similarities end. I
mean, it's also the coronation 2 days, so I can't not ask you about that. Does it change? I mean, do you have special celebrations in the Crown Estate, or is it just something that's, left to the organisers and the royals?
Well, we think obviously the celebrations over the weekends are great for the country, but our people every day get out of bed and come work for the Crown Estate to create value for the country. Okay.
Dan, thank you so much. Great pleasure to speak to you. Dan Labbat there, Chief Executive of the Crown Estate. And we're also getting some breaking news, PMI out of the UK. This is for April, its services. So it is a little bit backward looking, but still interesting. That PMI coming in a touch better than expected. 55.9, preliminary figure was 54.9. A reminder, anything above 50 is an expansion territory. Coming up, the King's coronation holiday could produce the latest drag to the UK economy, so we'll discuss that next as well. This is Bloomberg. are the economic implications for the UK of King Charles's coronation? This Monday's extra bank holiday could prove a drag on growth. It will be the second time in a year that royal events have weighed on the economy. Now, Anna Andrade from Bloomberg Economics joins us. Anna, so how big, first of all, good morning, how big of a drag will we see from the holiday on the UK economy?
Good morning. So we are actually expecting GDP to contract in May by 0.7% on the month. That's a fall that's similar in magnitude to the ones that we've experienced in the extra bank holidays last year. But I would say that the key thing to note is that, it's just a temporary drag on the economy. All the output that it's not produced in a given month will be regained in the following month. So overall, it's not a permanent hit. And the bigger picture really is that, the economy is doing much better than we thought at the start of the year, even with the extra bank holidays and with the industrial action introducing volatility into GDP data.
So what does that mean for the Bank of England going forward?
Well, I mean, the holiday, they will kind of probably, overlook it just because it's a temporary hit. But I would say the stronger economy overall is something that the BOE will consider next week. Although I would say that it's kind of, the surprises that we saw last month in CPI and wage data, that's really what's going to move the dial on the BOE. They had given as a framework at the start of the year that they said that they were going to be very data dependent, and data on that front has only surprised to the upside, giving very little option for the BOE, but to hike next week.
So, and I mean, we're in this really kind of funny way where there's cost of living crisis. Inflation seems to be higher than other parts of the Eurozone, but also growth is better. Does this come all to a head at some point?
Well, I mean, I would just say that growth is better. It's holding up better for now. Yeah. But if you look a bit further ahead in the second half of the year, there's not a lot of growth happening there because we expect tighter monetary policy to weigh on the economy. And I think, the big risk for the UK outlook right now is that if the Bank of England is forced to take rates higher, as it seems to be, then we can have kind of a monetary policy induced recession.
Yeah, and I guess it all depends on the credit crunch that we could or couldn't see. Are consumers holding up okay for the moment?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, we saw a lot of credit tightening at the end of last year, and I would say that we'll have to see from. In the UK, at least, it seems that the recent banking turmoil that we've seen, it hasn't had as much impact as it has on the US. So yesterday, the Fed, maybe managed to signal a pause, a future pause, because the credit is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And here in UK, we just haven't had that on the back of the banking turmoil yet.
Anna, thank you so much for coming on. And I would urge everyone really to look at a lot of what we do on Bloomberg Economics, some great research, Anna Andrade and her team. Now, coming up, we'll talk about In the City podcast with my co-host, Dave Merritt. Always fun, never dull. He joins me next. This is Bloomberg. Economics, finance, politics. This is Bloomberg UK. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, joining us now, Dave Merritt, my co-host on our weekly podcast, In the City. Dave and I have been doing this for about just over 6 months, a little bit, maybe more than 6 months. And Dave, we've had fun because we're trying to unpick the UK economy, but through fun conversations with leaders in their field.
That's right. It's a bit weird, isn't it, sitting at these podiums rather than with our headsets on and our mics in the podcast
dark
studio.
little room. Yeah.
That's just over there. But the idea for this was to kind of bring the listener into the room, in our big newsroom here, sitting at the heart of the City of London, Queen Victoria Street, over the road for the Bank of England. The conversation's happening here, but also in the square mile around us, kind of shining a bit of a light on the issues and what it tells you about the British economy, about the markets, and about the world as well.
So what surprised you? We've had some really good conversations. I know, we spoke to Nick Candy, who really said some terrible things about London, and he's moving to Dubai because he can't stand
Right, because of the crime, he said. That was an episode that went really viral last week. He said Dubai is having its moment, that London's kind of over. Everyone piled in on social media to say he's completely wrong. And that for me has been the surprising thing. You know, it's been so much turmoil, hasn't there, in the British economy ever since, I suppose, since the Brexit vote in 2016. But all the people we get in week after week keep coming back to the fact that London is where these conversations matter the most, that London remains the sort of beating heart of the markets across Europe and for investors all around the world.
I wonder whether, and I don't know whether you have this feeling in some, and also shout out to our great producer, someone who puts it all together and makes us fun, which is not always an easy feat. No, I'm kidding.
It's a tough edit, I think.
It is a tough edit, but it's basically trying to understand if it's a crunch point where, you know, the City of London could go either way. They could either win this or give its crown to New York.
Yeah, we wanted to go on the road to Paris, didn't we? Because, you know, Paris is definitely on the up in terms of a financial centre in Europe. But, you know, time and again, you come back to the fact that the scale of the infrastructure in London, that the talent, the numbers of people here, it really does outshine everywhere else. I think Alex Brazier, who we spoke to this week, that's the episode out today, from BlackRock, formerly of the Bank of England, you know, he talks about how we're at this inflection point in the global economy and actually how London is poised to really benefit. We're seeing the return of volatility, interest rates staying higher for longer. That's an opportunity for investors, and he thinks London's really well served to really benefit from that.
Yeah, and one of my favorite episodes was also with the legal and general chief executive, and he told us at the time that he was offered, you know, a big job at Apple, and then decided not to take it, and that kind of changed the course. And he's of course also really quite close to the king.
That's right, Nigel Wilson. I think the mic was off when he told us his king anecdote, wasn't it? I don't think
it was, but I mean, people open up, right? And it's very clear that their businessmen and chief executives are quite close to the king because of his sustainability efforts.
That's right, you know, and it's a different sort of regime, right, than before, and obviously with the environmental crusading that King Charles has been a part of, he was very much ahead of his time, and that's something we've explored in the podcast.
Coronation plans?
Oh, well, obviously, you know, get the bunting out, have a go at making the coronation quiche, presumably, you know.
I mean, I'm in charge of the G&T bar for this.
Right, the drinks, obviously,
Help everyone. David, thank you so much. My co-host, Dave Merritt, and we have a new episode out today. Subscribe, rate, review the In the City podcast. This is Bloomberg.